once we can let that conscious mind and the body starts to breathe, it opens up those memories. And they're not all from this necessary moment in time, lifetime. But the clearing of that, there'll be a deep feeling and emotion that's attached to that moment in time that we're trapped in.
So my sort of theory on when does the Age of Aquarius begin, it begins when we collectively wake up to the knowledge that we save ourselves.
I've even noticed it with women, like, because I've had a lot of women, there's a lot more compassion towards each other, whereas women have been in such competition in the way that we've needed to show up, which has been taught to us.
But I think the idea of suffering is a bit of a choice.
Yes.
I think it's like a choice to be suffering, because you can experience something and it can be painful and you can move through that but not necessarily suffer.
I've got you. You're okay. This is like hell on earth right now, but don't give up. Like you said, don't give up.
You sort of go from one extreme to the other extreme to find the balance point.
Yeah.
You know, it's a natural sort of process. I've not had any of that, so now I'm going to the other end.
I think that's the only way I can explain surrender.
Yeah.
Is like giving in to the fact that I don't know where I'm going and the unknown, but I feel like I'm dying. So welcome to episode 5 of Spill the SpiritualiTEA. I'm really excited today. We have a man on the show. Yay, first man. Luke. Now, Luke is a professional astrologer, specializes in the evolutionary astrology, helping the clients awaken at the soul level. He's also a fully qualified past life and subconscious regression facilitator, the safe exploration of past life experiences and subconscious clearing to help eliminate limiting and dysfunctional patterns of behavior. Luke is also an attuned Reiki master and healer. So we're pretty lucky to have Luke on here today. And what I love about Luke, I've known Luke for a little while now, is that he's really real. It's like there's no woo-woo, even though you're very woo-woo, Luke, there's a real Luke, and very personable and very honest. And I love that for a man in this industry. So welcome, Luke.
Thank you for having me.
I think we need a lot more real men doing this work, that it doesn't make it so weird and woo-woo.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny. Like I do look at myself, bald headed, tattooed sort of bloke.
Yeah.
But I'm an astrologer. Yeah. And I'm a healer and a regression therapist. And the desire for wanting to do that is to want to really help people.
Yeah.
And I found that during my own journey from, what I call my past life, even though it was this life, into this
I think we have those, don't we? It's like versions of this
that's
life.
Right. Version 1.
Yeah.
My transition from version 1 to now. These are the types of things that have been super helpful for me and enabled me to keep it really real.
Yeah.
And I want to sort of, especially when it comes to astrology, try and break down the spiritual woo a bit.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stereotyping.
Normal. Yeah.
Because there's a lot. I mean, the internet's a wonderful place, but also
But I mean, I think it can get so wanky.
Totally.
In the sense of, that's the only word I can use to describe it, that it becomes sort of this, we spoke about this with the spiritual ego, becomes a whole, like you're on another level.
Yep.
And that's not what spirituality is. And that's also why I wanted to do this podcast. And so I was saying with, I want it to be real. I want people to relate to this and realize spirituality, the way it's displayed in a lot of ways, is not the truth of spirituality in the way we relate to it in everyday life, and what the truth of what we're trying to understand within ourselves as on this journey. Yeah. In our spiritual awakening. It's gone so far, I think, away from the reality of what's within us and the simplicity of it. Yeah. That it's commercialized.
That's exactly
right. Is that the word
commercialized, monetized.
Yes.
Yeah. And in this day and age with social media, it's like views, likes, follows, all those sort of things are the metric. Yeah. And it's like it skews it into a particular, part of reality and society. And I like to look at, take astrology as an example. Prior to this renaissance that we're sort of going through, we're definitely going through a renaissance of this type of stuff. you used to have in the magazines, girly magazines or the newspaper, you'd have your horoscopes.
Yes.
And that was the level of mainstream astrology.
And I think a lot of people think of astrology as reading that. My mum used to send it to me all the time.
Yeah.
Out of the newspaper.
Totally. Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm a Virgo. Yeah. Okay, yes. Yeah. Some of that's accurate. Some of it's not so accurate.
Yeah.
But what it did for the collective was enable them to sort of dismiss it and put it aside to go, what is that? Yeah,
because it's such a broad spectrum of going, well, you're a Virgo, but all of the Virgos are very different.
Yeah.
In day to day, because there's obviously so many other aspects of being a Virgo and other signs that then create the person.
Yeah, they're just aspects of our functions of consciousness. And, Virgo's just one aspect. Because the sun was in Virgo when you were born doesn't mean that that's the entirety of your conscious makeup.
Yes.
So it might be a big part of it, but not the only part of it. And I think that's what the horoscopes in the magazines did, is it sort of created this non-generic, very...
it dulled it down.
Non-specific, very generic sort of, easy to just sort of cast it aside as pointless.
Mm-hmm.
Now with the renaissance of astrology, you have it gone sort of to the other way, where there's so much and it's so overwhelming that it almost has exactly the same effect.
100%.
And it's like, oh God, enough of that already.
Yeah. And I think that's this whole era that there's too much information that people are lost in the search of who am I, because they're still looking outside of themselves, looking for the key.
Yeah.
And it's not until we get to that place we go, holy shit, it's in here.
100%.
And the ball game changes.
Yep.
Because the external then starts to not be so important as you recognize the internal significance. And I just talked about on my episode with Krista, coming back to the body, coming back to the feeling, working on those beliefs. And you would know this with past life regressioning, working through those belief systems, working through your trauma, coming back. It's all in the body.
Yeah. Yeah. And the body is only ever existing in the present moment.
Yeah.
We can't taste yesterday or smell tomorrow.
No.
So when we're in the body, we're in the now.
Yeah.
And when we're here, that's the whole thing. Like when I do regression therapy, it's a big part of it is going back into the subconscious memory of all of the experiences and whatever comes through. It's amazing work, but it's a real important point to make, is that the most important life you're living is the one you're living now.
100%. It's only really the themes. We go back, I can read my past lives, and when they come in and I can understand, there's a whole multi-dimensional part of my being, but the reality of it is I'm still existing in this human nowness, and the themes of what have come through are what I'm working with.
Yeah, 100%.
It's not necessarily needing to know all of the past.
No.
It's, it's needing to know how to transmute it or move past it in the now moment, so 100%. I can be more of myself.
Yeah.
Whether that's generational, whether that's past life, whether that's in a child or, your childhood, it's all part of it is to keep moving deeper with a remembering of understanding of yourself.
100%.
Yeah. And do you find with astrology that gives people a little roadmap?
Yeah. I look at astrology or your astrological birth chart, not necessarily astrology, but your birth chart, as being what I call your soul's energetic blueprint.
Yeah.
So that's the energetics that you're working with. And, there's a lot of different ways in which those energies can express. Yeah. And there is functional and dysfunctional ways. So what astrology allows us to do is look at the blueprint and go, well, where am I in alignment and where am I out of alignment? And what part of me is expressing, and then why might that be the case?
Yeah.
So it's just a tool for self-awareness.
Yeah.
Now, awareness is an incredible thing to have the awareness. But, that's the knowledge or the knowing, the conscious awareness of what's going on.
Which can get stuck here.
the other part of that, which, we can look at from an astrological point of view, we've got the sign of Aquarius and the sign of Capricorn. Mm-hmm. They're the only two signs out of the whole entire zodiac that are side by side and ruled over by one planet.
Yeah.
All the other planets, their houses are divided. And the reason for that I perceive is that because they're really one quality, just split into two, and that quality is to lead to wisdom.
Yep.
And it's through the act of awareness, which is Aquarian, with the act of Capricorn, which is doing.
And this is where we're at in our life now?
We'll look at that. That's separate again.
Yeah.
But just understand the quality of Aquarius is to have conscious awareness.
Mm-hmm.
It's a conscious, objective, awakened perspective. It's like,
Yes.
So when you're doing personal development work, it's the knowing, now I get it.
Yep.
The other part of that picture is the integration of that awareness into a change of behavior. That's the doing part.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the Aquarius Capricorn sort of dynamic when you put them together. When act on your awareness. Does that
even look like a bit Aquarian being more feminine, Capricorn being more masculine?
Other way around.
Other way around.
Yeah, the air is masculine and the earth is feminine.
Because the quality of masculine and feminine is the masculine is the doing part and the feminine part is the more being part.
Yes.
So it's flipped.
So the doing part is the awareness. Okay, I know this.
True. Okay. Yep.
The doing part allows you to embody it.
Yes.
And it's the embodiment that's the feminine quality.
Okay. Yes, which makes sense.
Yeah,
okay, now I understand.
Yeah. So, and then it's like when you do those two things, when you get the awareness of what part of you is, hurt, or acting out dysfunctional or attached to a limiting belief, right? That's okay, I see. The other part then is to integrate that awareness into a change of your behavior or a change of your being, your core being. Yep. And then the two of those combined create wisdom.
Yeah. And that's embodiment.
100%.
And I think that's what people are bypassing on the journey, because it stays as knowledge and it stays
I know.
Awareness. In the loop that gets stuck in our mind because our bodies are in fear of going back in to feel what we need to change.
Yeah.
Because we're fearing the change or the unknown that takes that part where we have to come back in and nurture ourselves through that feeling or through what we've experienced, or to understand ourselves on a deeper layer. Otherwise we get stuck.
100%. And then the body's conditioning, it seeks comfort. So the reason why the work is difficult to do, to embody the knowing, is because you've got to put yourself into an uncomfortable position in order for that change to occur.
And that's fearful to the nervous system. The nervous system goes, holy shit, no, that's not safe. I want to go back to what I know. But what I know is not working for me anymore. So I'm really in a conundrum here. Because that's safe to me here, even though it's not working for me anymore.
Exactly.
So... And how I see it is we have to recognize that's not working for us. But there's also this expansion in our nervous system that we have to create a new metabolism in it. Like it's like building trust within ourselves that we're going to stay.
Yes.
To then move a little deeper. And then the nervous system goes, oh, we're safe. Okay, I can do this. But it's not, it's a real understanding that when you hit those resistance spaces, that it's going to feel uncomfortable, where we get the choice in that moment to go back into the mind or the old ways, or we come into the uncomfortable, like you said, the unknown, and go, okay, it's okay, I'm safe. What am I feeling? Like, let's go a little deeper. And like you said, where's the cord coming to? Is it going to an inner child, or is it going to something that I'm still stuck in belief-wise? But I always find there's a cord.
Yeah.
There's always a cord.
Trace that back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of our cords, they might stem from our experience or our reaction to certain experiences. And a lot of them stem from experiences that we've had not in this body.
Yes.
Soul memory.
Yes.
That's a lot of the regression work that I do is basically going back into those to look for the cord.
Yeah.
Oh, here it is.
Here it is.
Okay.
And that's what I find, because it's still in our DNA on some level in this body.
Yeah.
And that's what I love, because I've been doing breath work for a really long time. And that's what we start to open once we can let that conscious mind and the body starts to breathe. It opens up those memories.
Yes.
And they're not all from this necessary moment in my lifetime.
That's right.
But the clearing of that, there'll be a deep feeling and emotion that's attached to that moment in time that we're trapped in. And that's where, obviously, regardless, when you're doing past life, you're still breathing in this body.
Yes.
That you're moving it through.
Yes.
And like that energy is moving through.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that we get stuck on, not letting it move through, because we leave the body or we go back into what we know, and then we're not staying with the uncomfortable feeling and letting that move through to open space to the new version of ourselves.
Totally.
or the embodiment of letting go of what that was, that the energy goes to that moment in time. You've kind of reclaimed that part of yourself.
Yeah.
And then I feel that's the difference, that you can start to get out of the loop. They go, fuck, I'm here again. And again, you know, but you'll always come around at some stage with a different awareness and look at same moments in time again. Sometimes I feel to clear deeper.
Yeah.
But I find it really interesting because I always go to people, we'll come to your reaction first. What are you reacting to? Because it's normally something that's triggered us, that's poking in a wound.
Yes.
Or poking a memory.
Yes.
And then once you can calm yourself down and come back to the body, what are you feeling? And then I always, when we build that trust from head to heart, or to back to body, then I feel once you build that trust and the nervous system expands, then we can get to go, where's the cord leading to?
Yeah.
That's to me where I've found the change with the breath and obviously with the awareness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bringing the awareness has to come from here to here.
Yeah.
And then following it back to shift it.
Yeah.
I think that's the pathway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it's the same, it's exactly the same thing. But if it stays in awareness, as it's staying in the mind and the knowledge, it's not creating change.
No, I call them, and we've all been there, but it's the know-it-all. It's like, I know.
Yeah,
I know. But why is it still happening? Why am I still doing this? Why am I still behaving this way? Why am I still having this problem? Because I haven't taken what I know and made a change.
And that's the hard part of the path. If you want to call spiritual path, that is it. That is it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
All the rest of it is really just add-ons.
Yeah. I think that's where the basis of that saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Yeah. So it's the same thing.
Like, do the work.
Yeah. Just keep doing the work.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the presence of it changes and the experience of it changes and the perception of it changes. So you may not have a completely different life. Like I think manifesting has kind of, there's good and bad things in that, but then I think people think everything's going to be completely different. And I'm not saying you can't have it all, but what you want, what you need, and what you will have will also not necessarily be what the hugest version that you think is meant for you in this lifetime. What it is meant for you, I don't think will pass you by.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like what we want to force to happen.
Yeah, I think
might be not what we need.
The aspect of desire comes into it.
Yeah.
You know, even though we get what we need, do we get what we want?
Yeah, true.
You know.
Do you think we can have both once we get more embodied, or do you think what we need will suffice us? Do you know what I mean in that? Because we talk about desire, and I think desire is a great part of being a human, is to desire more and to want to evolve. I think we want to open to more. I think, like we just talked about before this, that learning through suffering has been a really programmed part of a human collective, I think. But also individually, how much we hold on to suffering. It's kind of like this, my life is hard and, I'm a victim to my life and the life is happening to me. And I think that is the shift when it's happening for you. But it still feels in moments when you want to revert back to like, it's happening to me, but you know.
Yeah. Well, that before you made a point about like when I was talking about Aquarius and Capricorn and you were saying, is that where we're at? And I was like, we've been in the age of Pisces and we're moving into the age of Aquarius. There's a lot of, I guess, not necessarily debate, but there's not much consensus on exactly when that may happen. I have my opinion on it.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're in the sort of dawning of this different aspect of consciousness that's coming through into the collective.
Yeah. We can feel it.
Yeah. In the age of Pisces, it's suffering.
Yeah.
It's suffering. You look at the story of Jesus, who's the savior God through the age of Pisces, and he suffers.
Yeah.
And he suffers for helping, and he suffers for speaking his truth, and he's crucified. Yes. And, that's the story of Pisces collectively, energetically. And I think that one of the core reasons for that is that consciously we were unconscious. We disconnected from our true connection to source. And we're walking around lost souls. It's like the story of Pisces is the fish. and they're separated, swimming in different directions. It's like our higher self and lower self are like
going in two ways, which is confusing.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, as we move into the age of Aquarius, we're collectively taking more responsibility for our, connection to ourself and to source, but also the awakening of our consciousness. It's meaning that we don't necessarily have to then transform through suffering as well as we leave behind the age of Pisces.
When you're talking about that, something just sort of came to me when you said moving from Pisces, and it comes from that suffering, that crucifixion. This is something that I've been aware of within myself. In stepping into this more conscious version and speaking out aloud, of being very open and vulnerable, there is that type of fear of, and you're saying there's a transition out. I really feel that transition of like going both ways and then coming into one in this Aquarian part, where that crucifixion, that wounding of having to suffer, and the fear of death, of being killed, or maybe, witchy, woundy, dying. That transmutation, when I really recognized there was a really deep ingrained fear of stepping out in my fullness, following my soul's path, really remembering myself, that was an internal fear to step into that. But it's pulled me beyond my comfortability anyway, if that makes sense, that I had no choice. So I had to keep moving with it, because that was my choice, obviously, in this lifetime, to keep, and I've thrown myself out there. But when you said that, I was like, well, that is really how it's felt, this kind of suffering, or being sort of felt like you've been under the thumb or suppressed.
Yeah, oppressed, for sure.
Oppressed, that there's now this opening. It feels like, okay, we can really speak out now.
Yeah. And that's a part, like there's two parts there. One, when we're in that aspect of consciousness, individually or collectively, because we're suffering, we become the victim of our suffering. And then what does the victim want is a saving. So that's what the Jesus story is in the Age of Pisces is. He represents the savior. I'll die for your sins. Yeah. Right? So,
which then we're always expecting someone to save us, and looking outside of ourselves.
100%. It keeps us trapped consciously in that age as a collective.
Yes.
So my sort of theory on when does the Age of Aquarius begin, it begins when we collectively wake up to the knowledge that we save ourselves.
That makes so much sense to me.
Yeah, we save ourselves, which means we have to take radical responsibility for ourselves and our life and the way in which we live it. And we have to overcome our suffering, and do the work and do the healing and get out of that victim mindset. And we're slowly, it's happening, you can sort of feel that energy.
100%.
So, when does the actual age happen? I think it's going to be,
when there's a mass part of the collective.
It's like a groundswell that gets to a tipping point, and then it's just, I think we've passed the point of no return.
Yeah.
It's not like we're going to go back. But certainly I think the more that we do, the more we inspire others around us as well to want to do that, to do that
And
work.
I think that's why I want, like we were talking about, and we started on the uncomplication of this whole journey, because the way it's been complicated, it's confusing people more not to do it.
Yes.
And that feels like something that is keeping us in suffering, because everyone's waking up, and a lot of, like, when I studied breathwork at 23, it was so fucking weird and woo-woo. I was working in a nightclub and running a modelling agency and running models, but then I was doing healing and breathwork and going through birth trauma and unraveling all my belief systems and during the day and working on. And so it was like this, you had to be in the spiritual closet.
Yep.
Or you would know, because we're around the same age. It was just weird.
Yeah.
You just didn't talk about that shit,
Yeah,
but it was highly who I was, but I had to do a normal job.
Yeah.
And I had to be accepted in that industry, but deeply who I was with that. And I'm noticing now there's obviously everyone's that now. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's gone to the other extreme, that I'm not a lot more knowledge necessarily, not embodied, and I think there's a lot more openness to it, but the authenticity is a little bit lost.
Yeah,
and the simplicity has been lost in what this journey is. It's gone from hidden to open.
Yeah.
And I feel like probably maybe we need to come back
And that will naturally happen as you transition. You sort of go from one extreme to the other extreme to find the balance point.
Yeah.
It's a natural sort of process. I've not had any of that, so now I'm going to the other end to sort of have all of it, then to pull sort of back and find that.
Yeah.
At the moment, astrologically, Pluto's back into Capricorn. It's going to go back into Aquarius. Pluto going into Aquarius in March of 2023. We're getting that more extreme polarization playing out now. If we look into the world, we see that sort of everywhere.
It's chaotic.
That's right. And that's sort of the way these things happen, is that there's a polarization that, emerges the extremes and eventually to find the unity that's in the center.
And I think the unity is very interesting because I've even noticed it with women, because I've had a lot of women. There's a lot more compassion towards each other, whereas women have been in such competition in the way that we've needed to show up, which has been taught to us. But now there's so much more openness and like, dude, we can't do it all. Even like I'm like obviously coming to mid-age, I'm going through perimenopause. It's like, holy shit, no one talked about it. Now it's a conversation that's happening and it needs to happen. It's like all of these things need to be open and in the conversation now.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the same for men coming into this work. The not being manly and not, you have to be kind of airy-fairy to do this type of stuff. And it's the same thing being blokey. You're a bloke. If you're a man, you can't express your feelings or you can't do this work or it's weird.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or you're a poof in the old terms of what we used to say.
Totally.
Not obviously,
no, I get it.
Something that you'd say now, but that's what it used to be. If you were softer or you were sensitive or you were feminine, then there was something wrong with your sexuality.
Yeah.
In the sense of you're not acceptable because it's different to what we have said is a man. How have you found that in this industry? Do you think it's been your plus being a blokey bloke?
Yeah.
Have you always been sensitive though from a child?
I'm more in touch with my feminine. I'm musically inclined. I wasn't fantastic at sport. I loved sport, but I wasn't great at it.
Yeah.
So, and then these disciplines now that I work with, they're said to be like your sort of feminine, disciplines and practices. So personally, though, I don't really look at myself in that way of not being a normal bloke, if that makes sense.
No, but so many. I'm not saying you wouldn't, because I don't either. But I think it's because you're much more grounded in who you are.
Yeah.
But I think the perception of spirituality or the way it's come across for a man to be embodied in his emotions or to be able to share that vulnerable part of himself, it's stayed very logical and it takes a lot of courage for a man. Funnily enough, I think men actually move faster than women once they really understand they can be vulnerable and there's safe places to be seen and they get the courage to do it, because I think there's not as much distraction, whereas women have got so many things going on. There's a lot more avoidant techniques, whereas men are sort of single focused. And I think sometimes when they're focused on it and they really get it and they drop in, they're like, oh, okay, it moves faster.
Yeah.
And that's the difference coaching men and women.
Right.
And there's not as much fluff with men.
Yeah.
You just get straight to the point.
Yeah.
And I like that because it's like, great, we're getting, but there's also that fear. What I notice is, oh, I'm going to tell my mates, you know what I mean? Or, will I be accepted in my friendship group? But the funny thing is when they open the conversation, they have a completely different understanding of their friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I remember going through my journey from version 1 to version 2.
Yeah.
And I did that internally and alone and didn't involve anyone in the process.
It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah, really.
The spiritual call it?
Kept to myself completely and sort of didn't have any of these types of conversations. That was 2014, 15, 16 years of my life. So it was a while ago now. What I've noticed, though, is that is shifting, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because you do have more men, open about this, talking about this and sharing their experiences.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing, is for the people that are coming to this to know that you're not alone, you're not crazy, and keep going.
Yeah. And those are the three things.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing internally is we feel we're going to be alone, because obviously where does that put us? Out of the pack. We're not safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're doing something different. That's to me my whole entire life. So it's, not something, even though I feared it, and in relationship I tried to not be alone, but I was always alone anyway. And I think I've said that before. So there was this acceptance of what alone was for me.
Yeah.
That I got really comfortable with. And I love it.
Yeah.
I'm actually quite a hermit anyway. Funnily enough, I think when I was younger, I thought I had to be everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's a younger thing. But it was I think it was more of a personality thing that I didn't want to be alone.
Yeah.
More so than recognizing I needed to be alone.
Yeah.
And the power of actually being able to sit alone and to be and just enjoy that space. It's so empowering.
Yeah.
And I really do think it is a really core wound for everyone.
Well, also we have a society that's designed to keep us occupied and busy and never feeling alone and always feeling comfortable and safe and secure.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of distractions out there for people. And I feel like that avoidance and distraction is probably one of the key things that this culture that's being built is really good at, helping people maintain those sort of avoidance and distraction
Well,
things.
they're tapped in everywhere all of the time.
That's right.
And I mean, I think it's learning how to self-manage in it. I don't think it's completely cutting off from all of it. I think, how do we live with it? How do we self-manage it? Because it's going to always be here. So how do we relate to it? So it's another relationship. And what's it triggering within us?
Yeah.
And because you've got kids, you've got boys, I've got boys. It's something too that I'm always trying to teach them how to self-manage with their phone, with their this, so that it's not completely drawing them in.
Yeah.
And that's all their focus. It's a little bit of a challenge, I'm not going to lie, moving into teenage. It's like so much now how they communicate with each other. But it's also getting them back in their bodies and back into relating and being present and feeling, because that's what I think it's taking you away from all of the time.
Totally.
And especially for teenagers, they want to avoid any feeling because there's so many of them.
Yeah. And it's not cool.
And it's not cool. And it's the hardest time of your life because it's so freaking confusing.
Totally.
So it's an interesting kind of situation for the kids. And as much as, we look at it and go, well, just get them off. I think they have to learn to self-manage more so than take it away.
Yeah.
There has to be an acceptance of what's moving through in this next coming.
Yeah.
That there's always going to be things that are going to pull us out of presence, out of our lives, but how do we work with it?
Yeah.
And not use it as another addiction to avoid.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's the interesting part with everything in life. You know what I mean?
Balance.
And do we ever have full balance, do you reckon?
No, I think that's the whole point, is life's a balancing act.
Yeah.
And the act is, if you ever watch someone on a tightrope, they're never balanced. They're always balancing. They're
like
making
that
small
analogy.
adjustments always.
Yeah.
So that they can stay, somewhere aligned. Occasionally they fall. Occasionally we do. Okay, cool, shit. I went out of balance. I fell.
Yeah, and it's always going to happen.
Absolutely. And it's part of the growing process, to fall.
And there's no perfection.
No. Tell the Virgo.
I know. I've got a sister that's a Virgo.
I'm my own worst critic. But I think that's the whole point of balancing, is that I don't think you ever reach that point of equilibrium. I think it's just the awareness of, like, when you're close to alignment and when you're outside of it. And then, maybe what we could sort of do then as supporting younger generations is give them the right tools and the knowledge so that when firstly, they can recognize when they've moved too far off alignment, and how do they bring themselves back? Yeah. And it's not to say don't, it's just to go, okay, cool. I've recognized I'm way off where I need to be. I think that if I went back and told my younger self that, I'd be like, look, you're never going to be perfectly in alignment or in balance. You're going to sway from side to side. When you're on this side or this side here, you're going to need these tools. Or here's the awareness to recognize that you're even out that far.
I think that's the big part, is the awareness to recognize when you're too far one way or the other. Because I think then there's this expectation of perfection, or I'm killing it, or I'm either like not killing it, or I'm really killing it. So you're either really out of balance this way, or really over, achieving this way, in the sense of like, this is my perfect. But it's never going to be either like that forever. It will pass. That balance of finding I don't think they're so extreme as you find a bit more consistency with the way you show up. And, oh yeah, I'm feeling a little bit heavy today and a bit down, and okay, that's fine. And just the self-acceptance of then you don't have to go all the way out to come all the way back in. I think that's the big thing, whereas like even in my wins, I know my day I can be killing it, and then later that night I'm like, okay, that's pretty humbling, that just pulled me back down, you know what I mean? Like, I'm feeling this. So the acceptance of the movement every day of how you're going to feel or be relating, it's not like you're going backwards or forwards. It's just like you said, that balancing after going, okay, well, this is okay, this is where I am now. But if I let the energy just be and the feeling that are coming up and I let them move through me, then it's amazing what I can achieve from that, instead of staying stuck there and going further deeper into the hole, into the suffering. Or when you're killing it and then all of a sudden it goes off a little bit and then you think, I'm not killing it now. I had a great day now, no, but I had a shit day at the end. You know what I mean? Like, why does it have to be good or bad? Why does it have to be light or dark? What if it is just about the acceptance that it's part of the life that we're living?
100%. And it's not about whether it's good or bad. It's how we choose to respond to what's going on.
React or respond. That's the two differences.
Exactly. When you're less aware, you're reactive. When you're more aware, you have an opportunity to choose your response. And that's the whole point of responsibility, right? It's the ability to respond. This comes back to that whole point around, taking responsibility and moving us out of this sort of victim mindset. The interesting thing is now when you sort of look into the world, especially, the post-COVID era, you could say that there's large segments of society that have definitely wandered too far onto the extremes.
I think on both sides though.
100%, absolutely. And it's like, wow, that's interesting that we accepting that extreme. So it's interesting to sort of watch that play
But I mean,
out.
that's also, I think, coming back to that, being able to observe, because whether you agree with something or not, and like in watching that extreme, you can get angry or you can get disappointed or you can love it, whichever way. But then the other extreme that's doing the other thing, you're feeding an energy somewhere, in the sense of like, if you're reacting to the way it's gone that far out or the way it's gone this way, and you're reacting to it in a way that there's an aversion or it's right or wrong, then you're feeding that. And that was a big thing through that whole COVID era. It was like, I just wanted to sit in a neutral space. I had my belief about it and I chose my path. I didn't really care what everyone else did. I cared that I stuck to what made me feel good. And also my job wasn't to necessarily get out and fight if I needed to share. I felt a lot of people were fighting for what was right. To me, right takes us further away from love. If we want to be right, then we're not having compassion for other people's point of views or understanding. And it has changed. And like you say, old version, new version of ourselves. Sometimes we don't have the awareness at that time, but that situation had to happen to create the new version of us. So whatever that was, I just feel like there's also, as a collective, if we're feeding into one energy, then we're also putting part of us into that, and the collective's going there. So if we want to evolve as to that unity space that we were talking about before, we have to also be aware of what's triggering, what's inside of us that's still projecting onto, might not be necessarily in the mini versions of yourself, but also the big external things that are right and wrong, and the judgments because it's still keeping us stuck in suffering on some level. Does that make sense?
I think also too, like, talk about polarization and the extremes, and if you're in opposition to an extreme, you generally are going to be in the same frequency on the other end of the spectrum. So you sort of stay trapped at that level of frequency. So, it's interesting to sort of try and find that balance point, this, where we are in this sort of, great awakening, if that's what it's called, and watching the extremes, from that point in the middle and like watching either end and the way they are and how they're responding and reacting and, to the extreme that it is going. It's interesting. It's like, wow, where are we going here? Like there's a lot here and there's a lot here. So it makes that middle point so much more important to gain some sort of balanced, way to see things. I think depolarization, which is not making something good or bad or being in opposition or opposing to it, the complete detachment of the idea of good or bad and just allowing it to be, is a rapid way to consciously ascend.
Yeah. And I think that's where we do move faster, when we're not attached to it. We can witness it, we can observe it, we can work through our reaction to it if we've got an aversion to it. But if we're holding on to the belief or the rightness of it, then we get stuck in whatever that is outside of ourselves. But we're not. That is just still a reflection of internally where you're stuck inside. So we're still coming back all of the time to that deep awareness of our understanding of ourself and where we're suffering. Where we're trapped. And I think that's, like you said, we've gone that way and we've gone this way. And the balance in between here, it's finding your middle, your truth, your understanding. And when you can sit in that and let go of the external, it doesn't matter if anyone doesn't understand you, as long as you understand you.
Yeah, 100%.
Because half the time it doesn't make sense to people.
Yeah. I mean, not many people understood me during my sort of transition from version 1 to version 2.
But I mean, if you had
Luke's lost the plot.
yeah. And that's okay. But I mean, if you had stopped, version 2 wouldn't have emerged, and the amount of people that are around you that from your immersion into version 2 are now, you might not be playing the old role and people might have been annoyed at the time. But for you to step into this, how much more it's made an impact because you're more you. And I think when we stay in that limited version of ourselves, we're robbing the world of what we're really here for. And collectively, like we're talking about, coming into that next level, if we're all meant to move there, the more that we can sit in that within ourselves, that energy is going to change everything.
Absolutely.
That's the change.
Yeah.
That to me, once there's more of us tipping it over into that place, without it being so complicated, uncomfortable it's going to be.
Yeah.
But not suffering. I don't think you have to, even though it can be uncomfortable, does it have to be suffering? No.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Do you find when you think of uncomfortable and suffering, do you think sometimes we put them together? If I'm uncomfortable, that means I'm suffering.
I think people do, definitely. They don't like to be uncomfortable, so they perceive any discomfort as a form of suffering. But I think the idea of suffering is a bit of a choice.
Yes.
I think it's like a choice to be suffering, because you can experience something and it can be painful and you can move through that but not necessarily suffer as a result. I think also too, we sort of conflate justice and fairness with the lack of justice or fairness as then must be suffering.
Yes.
I sort of look at it from like the human point of view of justice and fairness, and then looking at it from like a really heightened sort of perspective and going, well, all judgment and fairness is going to be dished out karmically at a point that it needs to be for those to go through that. It's not up to us to be the judge, jury, executioner of what is fair or just. It's just to go, you know what?
Because we can get caught in that, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I think suffering, there will be absolutely people out there who will probably have a problem with this, but I think there is a level of choice to it. It's an experience. I totally agree. And it can be a difficult one, and it can be painful, and it can be uncomfortable. Is it suffering? I guess that part of it for me, that I would look at it as a choice. Yeah, I'm choosing.
Well, it's a perception of what you choose, because yes, there's going to be some level of discomfort and pain to it. And like when we go through these versions of ourselves, there is a death-like feeling to it on many levels and layers, because that part of you has to die to then rebirth this new part. And there's many versions of that all the time. I mean, I think there's such a comfort even in knowing that every inhale we take is a birth and every exhale is a death. So that's the kind of cyclical nature of human life, really.
Yeah.
It's represented everywhere. But I mean, is it final? I don't think so, in the sense of like, and that's when we can let go of that sort of feeling that, oh, I've got to hold on, I'm going to be alone, you know, suffering, that's the stuff that keeps us trapped.
Yeah, for sure. And
I think that understanding of those beliefs and that awareness to come back in the body, that's when we get to move it all. That's when we get to, that's the fun part comes in. I was saying it's always fun, but I've noticed so much more lightness in. I can laugh at the shit now that I was like, that was hectic.
Yeah. Totally.
You got to kind of go, oh, that was hectic.
Yeah.
And you got to have some sense of humor sometimes of the shit that happens some days.
Yeah.
Because if you don't and you take it serious.
Well, we get caught in it.
Yeah.
And that's been my practice of recent, is just don't identify with what experience you're going through. It's an experience. The second you identify with that and make it good, bad, or whatever, you're now stuck being that avatar that is so strongly associated to whatever that is.
Yeah.
So my practice is to sort of ascend a bit higher and look upon it from a perspective that allows me to detach.
Yeah.
So then I can be like, oh, my human self is moving through this.
Yes.
And my human self is not fucking enjoying it.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's an aspect of me. Is it all of me? Is it a true me? Is it the eternal me? Possibly not.
And I think that's a beautiful way of looking at healing too. And I always say this to my clients as well, it's not all of you that's experiencing this pain right now. That you've moved significantly in your understanding and what you've embodied in the sense of how you feel now. Just because you're experiencing this right now, there's an aspect of you that's coming up or is, you know, normally a past aspect of you that is ready to be integrated or reclaimed.
Or killed.
It
must die.
You must die. But in that sense, it's like, that's what you're experiencing. So don't go back in, like you said, sometimes it's witnessing that, knowing that you have moved and that you are okay through this really challenging moment. And on the other end, that doesn't take you fully into kind of spiraling, I think, down into the darkness of where you may have landed a few times. And we've all landed there many times.
Yeah, I've been a couple of times close to ending life. Yeah, yep, definitely. I don't think I'd ever would have gone through with something like that, but there would have been a part of me that go, this is good. This is the best thing to do now.
Yeah, because
it's to step off stage. Yeah, so.
And I think we've all had. I don't know anyone that hasn't had.
Yeah.
And I've just gone sometimes, geez, God, like, really? Like, what do you want from me here? Like,
yeah.
I've had those moments where I'm at that precipice, but I'm going, what more do you want from me? Like, how much more do you want me to walk through in this path? And I feel like there is a level of suffering in it, but also too, like, can I get to this next bit? Because this is really tough.
Yeah.
And you kind of do just want to go, if I just went that way.
Yeah.
And give up.
Yeah.
In the sense, really, literally, those dark thoughts are so easy to get so caught and consumed into. And once you let that overtake you and that, like you said, zooming out and that higher version of you, there's this, you're okay. This is just an aspect of you having these.
That's right.
Thoughts and feelings. You're not there.
Yeah.
But you're experiencing this.
Yeah.
So
it's
let
a
that
separation.
Aspect, yeah.
Sort of to separate those aspects of yourself and to allow the part that is experiencing it to experience it, but also recognize there's another part that can observe that experience.
And holds you in a certain safeness to go, I've got you. You're okay. This is like hell on earth right now, but don't give up. Like you said, don't give up. There's something on the other side of this. But there is a type of giving up. Giving up, surrender is different.
Yes. Yeah.
To the giving up.
Yeah.
Where you can let go.
Yes. 100%.
And sometimes I think that gets confusing when we get to that really, it's like, surrender, let go, give up. They're all really fucking close.
Yeah. And we try each one of them out. Like, oh, let go. Oh, that didn't work. Maybe I need to surrender.
And like you said, that surrender is kind of like that let God and let go and let God kind of thing. It's not going to pass me by. It is what it is. Mm-hmm. And right now I can't change the situation, but I can have a whole lot of acceptance for what is.
Yeah.
Humbling.
Extremely. Those are turning points. For me, they've been massive turning points, getting to that point. And at that point, it's a fine line between wanting to be here and not wanting to be here sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, but when you finally get to that point and you do surrender or you just let go, they're usually the defining moment of the change that had you had to be brought there until you let go.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's like literally standing on the edge of the cliff.
Yeah.
Choice.
And let go of whatever it is that you're avoiding or whatever it is you're denying or whatever it is that you're sort of up against. And it's like, let it go. It'll be okay.
And I can feel that in my body. It's like that heart. You just like everything. It's just like, you know, and it does. It feels like a death.
Yeah.
And it really is. And I think that's something that when you can find acceptance in that death-like feeling but you're not dying or choosing death. There is that's surrender. It literally is surrender. I think that's the only way I can explain surrender.
Yeah.
Is like giving in to the fact that I don't know where I'm going and the unknown, but I feel like I'm dying.
Yeah.
And I've got to let that be okay.
Yeah. And it is a death. It's the death of the part of your ego that was associated or attached to whatever that was. It has come to its end.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the ego death. And they're never easy.
Ego deaths are never easy.
No, you know, but that's...
But I find, my perception of it has changed because I know I'm okay. So I move through things a lot faster. Yeah. Shit that I would have held on to. And I do think that's partly the energy in the sense of what we're experiencing right now energetically as on this planet, that it's moving faster and it's easier. Like I really see the difference between when I used to work with clients and when I work with clients. Like shit that used to take me 10 years to get through. People are getting through in 6 months, awakening so much faster, moving through, but they're not having the tools. Like you said, when I'm here, what do I do? When I'm here, what do I do? How do I get to that middle point? I think that's what everyone, because we're moving so fast, how do I get back to my middle? How do I get back to my alignment? Knowing what that is.
Yeah.
And like you said, zooming out, holding yourself in some loving awareness, regardless of which side you're on, you know, to move that balance back to the tightrope and the moment.
Yeah, my work that I've done with the regression therapy has helped me recognize that there is a part of me that's been in every life.
Yeah.
And I can access that part of me if I'd like, that has been aware and present in every experience ever. Maybe that would be what we would call our soul. And to step into that aspect of me in moments of challenge have been really interesting because it's like, you know, if I put that part of me in control, it's looking at this tiny little life as like a grain of rice on an endless spiral of eternity. It's like, oh, that's just that little bit there. Okay, let's go through this little bit. You know what I mean? And it's been super helpful because it's like, okay, that part's going to suck, but if I put it into context to all of this, it's actually nothing really. It's just a moment.
It can make it a little bit less important.
Intense. Yeah.
Because we take it all so personally, like this is it and this is only happening to me.
Yes.
But it's probably happened to you many times or like you've got many versions of maybe the same experience. Yeah. In your soul's experience. Yeah. But this is how this Melissa version or this Luke version is experiencing it now.
That's right. Yeah.
How are we going to deal with it in this life?
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, you know, I think when we get stuck is when the human Luke part of me has forgotten the other part.
Yeah.
And I'm now just stuck here and I've forgotten that, you know, oh, that's right. I came here. I existed before this life. I will exist beyond it. But I've so strongly identified with my problem or my issue, my challenge or my whatever I'm going through that I've forgotten that completely. Yeah. And when that happens, that's when I usually suffer, if I want to call it that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I totally agree, because you get so consumed with it's happening to me right now. It's all about it's happening to me. I've got no control over it, which takes us back into that victim part of having no control over how we perceive our life. And I think it's all perception, isn't it?
Well, that creates reality, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting that you say that. Even if someone wasn't really so-called spiritual, have just started, how would you advise them in a sense of like to have that higher perspective? They don't really understand that there's a soul and you're having a human experience, which that's kind of the first thing that people kind of have and but then they go, well, what does that mean? Like, you know, I'm a soul having a human experience. Like, I think it's more of learning how to hold ourselves, that there is a higher knowingness that comes from coming back into our heart. That's the only way I can think, is when we come out of the limited version of what our head, primal start that comes from our nervous system, hits us here in fear, we're going to create lots of beliefs and stories about that. But if we can come back into here, it's kind of limitless. In the sense of like, when we can lovingly hold ourselves, we open that from the protection that we've closed it down to more of a higher version of ourselves that has a bit more love and compassion, which to me opened me up more to my higher versions, soul versions, multi-level. You know what I mean? That was the simplicity of really opening for me.
So for me, it was different. It was knowledge that I needed, because my nature is I want to know. I've always wanted to know.
Oh, I think that was definitely.
What am I doing here? Who am I? Why are we here? Yes. What is the meaning and purpose of all of this?
Yeah.
And
true.
Like for a period, probably from maybe adolescent, young adulthood up until maybe my first Saturn return, which is around the age of 28, 30, I'd sort of given up that quest.
Yeah.
In the point of just gone through the conditioning and the programming, and this is what you got to do and how you got to do it, and this is where you got to be.
Yeah.
And then, through creating a life for myself based on that conditioning and being completely not happy, unfulfilled, was the catalyst to sort of like look again, to start that quest to go, well, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah.
And, for people that are just beginning and they're wanting to expand, or they're getting that sort of call to like, my advice would be to seek knowledge. And you don't have to find the truth, you have to find your truth, and for me, I did that by going down rabbit holes and looking at conspiracy videos and looking at all sorts of things and exposing myself to so much information to sort of really
see what sat.
Yeah, to see what resonated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely is the point, is like, you were completely right with the knowledge part. I always had that. That was a hunger. That was a knowing. I asked way too many questions. I've always questioned everything. So that knowing definitely was my path. But I think the integration of all of that knowledge and everything that I kept exposing myself to, the only way I could really understand and open to it was taking that from here to here.
Yeah, well then, I on my journey and all the work that I did and the changes I had to make in my version 1 lifestyle and life and avatar led me to a point where I got clear of all of that, and I was like emerging into this, and I started to have I sort of get why we're here and what we're doing and all of that. Yeah. And my longing was for love.
Yeah.
My longing was, well, okay, cool, I get it all, I understand, I'm changing, and this is how the world is, and this is the soul, and and then it was like, yeah, but where's love? Show me love. What's love? What is love? Can I have love? Where is it? How do I find it? What does it look like? Am I worthy of it? All these types of questions.
Yeah, worthy of it.
And I went into an ayahuasca journey.
Okay.
And the first ceremony I did, I went in with this idea of like, oh, okay, cool. What's this about? Didn't really put too much pressure on myself.
Yeah.
And you had to sit in a circle with like probably 30 people. They went around and they shared their intention.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there going, oh, you're going to have an intention for this? All right.
I didn't come prepared.
So I'm listening to everyone else's intentions.
Yeah.
And then it gets to me and I sort of like put a few of everyone's together and went, yeah, I'm doing that too. Like that's what I'm here.
Yeah, of course.
And my first experience was It was interesting. I had some moments where I got some deep clarity around some of these conditionings and behavioral patterns that I need to overcome.
So it was like a higher seeing for you.
Yeah. So then that was on the one night, and then you have a day off. And then the second night, I was talking to a friend I'd made during the ceremony, and she kept saying, because she'd done a few sessions, she goes, sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes nothing happens. Anyway, the first ceremony, not much happened for her.
Yeah.
And I said, isn't it interesting? You had that experience and that was your, the way you were looking at it. And I had this sort of like, experience because I was like, I'm not sure what I'm doing here. I said, what if we got really clear on intention and made it very, very clear? And we went into ceremony with a super clear question or intention. Yeah. I said, why don't you go away and work on yours and I'll work on mine and we'll share our intentions and we'll write down and then we'll gauge the next experience. So I went away and I went, okay, what is love?
Love that.
Yeah, so
love that.
So the Foreigner song, I want to know what love is. Literally, I was like, I want to know what love is.
Yeah.
So I came back to her and she had, what does my life look like when I'm in alignment? I was like, oh, that's a good one. So mine was just, what the fuck is love? Come on. And at the time I was single. And so I go into the ceremony and you take the medicine and it starts to work some magic on you.
Yeah.
And I could feel it coming in. And before I drank the medicine, I had a really clear intention. I held the medicine in my heart and I said my intention. I put it into it. I was really, really conscious of it. And when I went into the sort of journey part of the ceremony, you sort of get this, it's like a conversation with your higher self, or whether it's the spirit of the ayahuasca, the great grandmother. And I sort of like, well, show me love. And she's whispering, let go. Stop looking for it. It's not out there.
Yeah.
Give up. What?
This is not what I asked for.
I want love. Come on, show me love. And it's like, stop looking for it. Surrender. So I had these moments of like, and because you're under, psychedelic influence, your conscious mind is sort of long left the building, and you sort of like, just let go a little bit. And as I did, I had these waves of euphoria wash across my body.
Yeah.
And then it sort of was whispering, going, see, like this. And I was like,
because it's a receiving, isn't it?
Well, I deepened that.
Yeah.
And it said, love is who you are. It's not something you look for. It's something that you are. Let go. Stop looking for it. It's not out there. You are love. Be it. And in that moment, I got it and I let go. And you're listening to live music as you're journeying. And we were in this wicked old restored church on this, big property. And in that moment, everything went to love. The music, the architecture, the people, everything. And I was just floating in love. And the mother is saying, see, there it is. You don't need it, just be it. And that was like,
yeah.
So you talk about your experience of like connecting to the heart. That was my personal experience of how I gained that connection.
Yeah.
Because I'm a very analytical, I like information, knowledge.
Yeah.
And I searched a lot and I got that. I got it. I get it.
Yeah,
but where's the love bit?
Yeah.
And then I did the journey.
How did that translate for you when you got that information into it? There's an integration part of that, obviously, because you don't just come back and go, hey, dude, I'm love. Like, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, because I think love shows you what isn't love, like when you surrender into it. And the more I've started to receive the same download in a sense that you got from that's my perception of it too, that came literally, I've got to be here to open up. But the receiving also is that I've got to let go and receive, because you can't keep doing to get love, because there's a getting in that. There's a not just being in it and opening to it.
Yeah.
And then that means I've got to have an open heart. I've got to be open to myself. It's like that kind of connection then is completely different, because there's a surrender. I find receiving the hardest part of it, in the sense, not necessarily from someone, but receiving that fullness of, like, how you said that everything was love. There's a hugeness in that that I think we don't live in in an everyday experience. But when you feel that euphoria and you hold that in your physical form and you know what that is, you're like, that's big. That's a lot to receive. It's like brings you to tears receiving.
Yeah.
And I have those moments all the time now in my life. It's like, that up-leveling is like, God, my heart feels like it's cracked open again and everything's just like, fuck.
I think that's a glimpse into the window of enlightenment, right? Yeah. It's like obtaining that state.
So how did you integrate that into life?
Well, it's interesting because the ceremony that I did was run by a very reputable shaman, and he was big on integration. So we spent a whole day after the 3-day ceremonies talking about and discussing
so important
integration and what it meant and what to do. So we went around and shared like, okay, we've got that awareness. What are you going to do with that? And my answer was, I'm just going to be love. Like, I'm just going to be love. I'm going to be love in my life.
And how did that look like for you in life?
Like being present, not looking for it, not waiting for it, not trying to, but just recognizing opportunities to be it and engage with it as well. So with a smile on a stranger's face, as you passed a beautiful flower, the moment of just, wow, like, you know, it's like, and the more you sort of were consciously aware of that, the more it showed up in life as well. In reflection. And then that led me from that point on when I was single into a beautiful loving relationship, which led me into another beautiful loving relationship, which is now what I would class as my soulmate.
Yeah, I love that.
You know, so that recognition, that awakening of that and that realization and simplifying it. Yeah. Completely simplifying it for me. Like, you don't have to go and do stuff. You have to learn how to be and be in the moment and be what you perceive to be love, you know?
That's that inner understanding we keep coming back to again.
Yeah. And it was so simple. Like, that journey was a 6-hour journey with the medicine. There was an hour and a half of that where I was in that state. And I was just like, you know, tears in the eyes. Yeah. And just everyone else in the room is journeying, but you're not connected to them in the sense of your physicality or your consciousness, but you're aware of their presence. But everyone was just love. It was like, wow, this is phenomenal. Yeah. You know, so I have to remind myself of that. And even when I recall that experience, I get goosebumps over my body, and I get my inner dialogue saying to me, well, you fucking idiot, you've forgotten about that lately, haven't you?
Yeah. And it's funny when you do remember, in a sense, have like a conversation like this, because even for me, it's that same opening. All of a sudden it's like, oh, there's a little drop in back into the body, and it's like, oh, what am I, you know, because we can get so caught up in the day-to-day stuff and all of our doing, and we can still be conscious in moment to moment, but sometimes there's another level of being in it. And then it drops you into this softening sense of like, oh, everything's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's fucking crazy, but everything's okay.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like then you can, you know, interact from that level of awareness with others as well, which is nice.
Yeah.
You know, and you really catch yourself too when you engage someone that's, you know, opposing you or your values, or they're upset or they're angry or whatever's going on. It's like, oh, this is a test of love, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think that's the part that we went back to about how can we be, if we're staying in love, and how can I be love in this moment? That's where I can either feed into the fight or being right, or I can choose love.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you have to agree with me or I have to be right and you have to be wrong.
Yeah.
There's just going to be either we're in a completely different awareness right now, and maybe we'll sort of come back into synergy at some stage, or we're just going to have to agree to disagree lovingly, and your truth is going to be your truth.
Yeah. And I think that's a real test as you walk the path, is to using that as a sort of a set point to gauge where you're at and what things take you out of that alignment, you know? And it's like, oh, someone did that? And that was so easy to get me out of alignment. And all they had to do is that. Yeah. Okay, well, there's an opportunity for me to do some work. Yeah. You know, so, and then that keeps the whole sort of process, for me anyway, it keeps it super simple.
Yeah. And I find that's a gift. When someone does trigger me, I'm like, oh, wow, okay, you got that was easy. Like, you know, those little pokes that the universe kind of gives you through the reflection of someone else. You can either react or take it as a gift and go, oh, okay, what's that showing about me? I always go straight in. I don't even worry about you. It's like, see, whatever you've done, that's not my problem. It's what's going on with me.
There's a little part of Luke in here that likes to indulge in the reaction of like, you fucking piss me off. Let me just play it out. My partner's like going, come on, cool. Why are you letting this get to you? Like, just give me my fucking 10 minutes. Just let me have my moment. And I'm raging, like I say, let me rage.
Let me validate my rage right now.
And then later on I'm like going to her, okay, you're all right.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the knowledge that you can rage, but you're not projecting it anywhere. It's when you're projecting the rage that there's a difference when I'm reacting right now, but I'm not projecting. I'm just validating that I'm in reaction. And then once I can regulate again, I'll find the understanding. Yeah. It's a very difference to be unconsciously just going into reaction and rage and then just projecting that.
Yeah. I look at the earth as being the great recycler of energy. That's why when you die, your body's decomposed into the earth. So when I get into those heightened states of like disappointment or anger or rage or anything like that, I'm out in nature. Yeah. And I'm saying, come on, you're going to help me with this. Yeah. And then I'll scream at a fucking tree or I'll go into the waves of the beach and I'll start having this really loud conversation as if the person of my rage is there standing next to me. Yeah. And just letting it go, you know. I find that super therapeutic.
And I think it is finding those things to soothe your soul, in the sense to come back to the alignment when there is that huge reaction, that sometimes we just can't necessarily jump straight back into that softness or that surrender into love. And that's okay. We're going to have that, but how do we slowly, lovingly bring ourselves back? And we need to be able to self-manage. That's coming back to that, okay, well, I know when I get to here, then that's my tool to come here. Not getting stuck on, I have to do that tool every day, and I'm, you know, because if we get addicted to that, then when that kind of oppositional flow happens, we don't know how to deal with the challenge of it, because it throws all of that routine out of the thing. And I find people that get stuck in that routine don't just go straight into reaction, go down that path. So I think it's knowing, like we come back to, I think that's been the whole coming back to the alignment, knowing when you're out of it and how to bring yourself from one way or the other back into that understanding of you.
Absolutely.
I suppose it does come back to love, and it's more loving awareness.
Yeah.
That's not always going to be right, but it's love. Yeah. And that is going to mean different things to everybody.
For sure.
Yeah. I love that. It was such a good chat. I love that we just got to go on all like layers.
We're everywhere.
We did. But that's how I know that's what I want it to be. I wanted to open that, because your astrology is such a huge part, and so is everything that you bring to the table. But it's how you see the world too that really is uniquely why you do what you do. Yeah. Everyone can be an astrologer, or everyone can be a Reiki person or a part, but it's what you bring uniquely through your understanding that changes everything. Yeah. And it's you. You know what I mean? And that's why we can't keep pretending not to understand ourselves or to try and fit in and be like someone else, because that's not what's healing. Like, what you say is going to resonate so clearly to some people. How I say it is going to. And that's why we do what we do. It's not the facilitation. It's not the thing. It's not the actual, I'm a breath worker. I'm a, it's the way that we've embodied it, that it makes it easier for someone else to follow the path.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just, I have a desire, I know what it's like to go from version 1 to version 2, and I know what it's like to do that on your own, and I know what it's like to live in the version 1 and be unhappy. Yeah. And, when I got to the other side, I was like, well, why does it have to be like that?
It's funny how we get to that something, oh, geez, that was hard. Why did I make it so hard?
Yeah, so it shouldn't be like that. This should be easier.
And that's why I do the same thing. So I don't want people to have to go through that hard. Yeah. They're going to have versions of it, but it doesn't have to be alone. I did it all alone like you, silently, suffered a lot, and felt very isolated. Yeah. And I think now we can do it with deep support and understanding, and to be seen through it, because 100%. Being seen in it helps move it so much faster back into love.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Thank thank you for coming on. I'll have all of the details, and I'm definitely coming to get my chart done.
Yeah, cool.
52's already started to be a big year, so we need to know what's going on.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers.